The contraction slammed into Megan Harper so hard her vision blurred. She clutched her belly with one hand and the rail of the hospital bed with the other, until her knuckles went white. This was not how she'd pictured having her first child. 36 weeks pregnant, labor starting early, and no one at her side. Rain hammered against the windows of Boston Memorial Hospital, the storm outside echoing the chaos inside her chest. 8 months ago, everything had seemed settled. She'd been engaged to Jack Donovan, an up-and-coming investment banker, their first baby on the way. A wedding to plan, a nursery to finish, a shared future. Then she'd come into the kitchen one ordinary morning and found a note on the counter. I can't do this. I'm sorry. No explanation. No phone call. No forwarding address. 3 years together reduced to 7 careless words. Breathe through it, Megan. The nurse's voice was gentle but firm. Rita, round-faced and calm, had been in and out of the room every 15 minutes since Megan arrived at the maternity ward. That's it. Slow and deep. The doctor will be here shortly. Megan nodded, panting, her chestnut hair plastered to her damp forehead. She'd rehearsed this moment in birthing classes a dozen times, with Jack squeezing her hand, whispering encouragement. Instead, it was just her, a beeping monitor, and a voicemail from her sister Penny, trapped in Chicago by the same storm now pummeling the East Coast. Your blood pressure's a little high, Rita murmured, studying the monitor with a frown. I'm going to page the on-call obstetrician. Dear. Reynolds was supposed to take you, but she's tied up with an emergency. Another contraction gripped Megan, stronger than the last. She sucked in air and forced the words out between clenched teeth. Who's coming instead? Dr. Reed, Rita said, pressing buttons on her pager. One of our best. He just got back from setting up a maternal health clinic in Tanzania. You're in very good hands. The name hit harder than the contraction. Reed. It couldn't be. Boston was full of doctors. Surely the universe wasn't that cruel, or that precise. 4 years had passed since medical school. 4 years since she'd walked away from the man she'd thought she would marry so she could chase the dream of a concert pianist's life in New York. 4 years since she'd looked into Ethan Reed's piercing blue eyes and told him they wanted different futures. Before she could decide whether fate was playing a sick joke, the door opened. Time seemed to slow as a tall man in navy scrubs walked in, head bent over the chart in his hands. Miss Harper, I'm Dr. Reed. I understand you're. He looked up. The sentence died. Those same blue eyes, once endlessly tender, now widened with disbelief. Ethan, Megan whispered, suddenly excruciatingly aware of everything. Her sweat-soaked hair, her twisted face, her swollen middle, the glaring absence of anyone else in the room. For a few heartbeats, neither of them spoke. The hiss of the four, the blip of the monitor, the distant rumble of thunder. All of it faded under the heavy presence of their shared past. Ethan recovered first. Megan watched the shock in his expression flatten into brisk professionalism, the kind that clearly came from long practice hiding what he felt. Megan, he said evenly, I didn't know you were back in Boston. I moved back 6 months ago, she managed, right before another contraction seized her. This one tore a cry from her throat she couldn't bite back. In an instant he was at her side, voice calm, movements efficient. All right. Deep breaths. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Let's see how far along you are. His touch was clinical, assured. The gold Rolex on his wrist flashed under the fluorescent light. A far cry from the cheap plastic watch he'd worn in med school that left a green ring on his skin. You're at 7 centimeters, he reported, stripping off his gloves. You're progressing quickly for a first baby. How far apart are the contractions? About 3 minutes, Rita answered when Megan could only gasp. Ethan nodded, jotting notes on the chart. The baby's heart rate is strong. Your blood pressure's high enough that I want to keep a close eye on it though. He paused, then asked the question Megan had been dreading. Is the father on his way? Heat rushed to her face. She shut her eyes. He's not in the picture. Something flickered over Ethan's features, surprise, maybe pity, maybe judgment, but it vanished as quickly as it came. I see. Is there anyone we should call? My sister Penny's trying to get here from Chicago, but with the storm. Another contraction built, forcing her sentence into a ragged groan. When it passed, she found Ethan watching her with an intensity that made her squirm. I'll be your doctor today, he said quietly. Unless you'd rather I find someone else. The thought of explaining their history, of collapsing again in front of a stranger, was beyond her. Whatever had happened between them, Ethan was brilliant. He always had been. No, she forced the word out. You're here. That's what matters. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. All right then. I'll be back in about 30 minutes, sooner if you need me. He turned toward the door, hesitated. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about all of this. When he was gone, Rita adjusted Megan's foreign blood pressure cuff. You two know each other, she said, not bothering to make it a question. We were together in medical school, Megan answered, keeping her tone neutral. She had no intention of telling a near stranger that she'd chosen music over the future she and Ethan had planned, breaking both their hearts at once. Wait. Rita's eyes grew enormous. You were with Dr. Reed? Dr. Ethan Reed? Girl. She shook her head slowly. Do you know what he's done since med school? He's practically a celebrity. Started that foundation that builds maternal clinics in developing countries. There was a whole profile in Time last year. Megan's chest tightened. She'd seen that magazine in a dentist's waiting room. Ethan's face on the cover, older, sharper, even more handsome. The billionaire doctor saving mothers worldwide blazed across the top. She'd read about the tech company he'd launched in his second year of residency, the medical software that had transformed hospital management and made him unimaginably rich. She'd felt fierce pride and a hollow ache. Ethan had done everything they'd once dreamed of together. She, on the other hand, had a failed music career, a broken engagement, and a baby on the way with a man who'd disappeared. The next 2 hours dissolved into a blur of pain and half-formed impressions. Contractions came harder and faster. Nurses came and went. Rain slammed against the glass. Somewhere in the hallway someone laughed. Ethan reappeared as promised, still composed, still professional. He checked her, checked the monitor, asked quiet, efficient questions. He never mentioned their past, but sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. We're getting close, he said after another exam. The baby's in a great position. You'll be pushing soon. Almost on cue, a heavy pressure bore down in her pelvis, primal and impossible to ignore. I think it's happening, she gasped. The room shifted into high gear. Nurses lifted her legs into stirrups. Ethan donned a gown and gloves. Instruments were laid out, machines adjusted. Through the haze, his voice threaded steady and sure. On your next contraction, I want you to push down like you're having a bowel movement. Exactly. You're doing really well. She bore down with everything she had. But as the next wave crested, a different kind of panic clawed up her spine. Something's wrong, she panted. I can feel it. Ethan met her eyes, his expression grave but steady. The baby's heart rate is dipping a bit with each contraction. That can happen, but it means we need each push to count. If necessary, I'll help the baby out. The next contraction hit like a tidal wave. As she pushed, the monitor shrieked in alarm. Ethan's hands stayed sure, but his movements sharpened. The cord might be getting compressed, he said, voice still level though he moved faster. Megan, I need one more big push. If that's not enough, we'll use a vacuum to assist. She clung to his words, to the strength in his tone. Summoning something beyond exhaustion, she pushed. The monitor numbers plummeted. The heart rate still dropping, Ethan said tightly, reaching for a metal device on the tray. We're not waiting. We need this baby out now. The room exploded into controlled chaos. Extra hands appeared. Commands flew. Through it all, Ethan's gaze found hers, holding her there. In that instant, their history vanished. He wasn't the man she'd left or the figure from a magazine cover. He was the doctor standing between her child and disaster. Trust me, he said, his voice pitched low for her alone. I won't let anything happen to either of you. She believed him. She had to. One more, Megan, he commanded, positioning the vacuum extractor with practiced speed. This is it. The baby has to come now. With a raw animal sound torn from something ancient inside her, Megan pushed. The pain wiped out thought, time, memory. There was only effort and the desperate need to get her baby safely into the world. That's it. Keep going, Ethan urged, all his attention on his work. I see the head. Dark hair just like yours. One last monumental effort. and then an indescribable sensation of release as her baby slipped free. Silence held for a breath. Then a furious wail split the air, the most beautiful sound Megan had ever heard. "It's a girl," Ethan announced, his detached tone cracking to reveal genuine emotion. "A beautiful, perfect little girl." Tears streamed down Megan's face as nurses briskly wiped and wrapped the baby, then nestled the tiny, squirming bundle onto her chest. Through her blurred vision she made out a scrunched-up face, a shock of dark hair, impossibly tiny fists. "Hello, little one," she whispered, overwhelmed by a love so fierce it hurt. "I'm your mom." Ethan stayed at the foot of the bed, quietly delivering the placenta, stitching a tear, checking for bleeding. Megan hardly registered it. Her whole world had collapsed into the warm 7-pound miracle breathing against her skin. "She's perfect," Rita said, tucking a blanket around the baby. 10 fingers, 10 toes, strong lungs. "Do we have a name?" The question jolted Megan. She and Jack had tossed around ideas but nothing had stuck. After he left, she'd avoided thinking about it, as if naming the baby alone would make his abandonment more real. "Lily," she said suddenly. The name felt right in her mouth, familiar and new all at once. Lily Grace Harper. At the foot of the bed, Ethan looked up. For a second, something sparked in his eyes, recognition. In another life, lying awake in cheap med school housing, they talked about future children. Lily had been the name they'd both loved for a daughter. "It suits her," he said quietly, snapping off his gloves. "You did incredibly well, Megan. You both did. You're going to be fine." As the staff finished their checks and drifted out, Megan studied Ethan openly. Gone was the intense, sometimes impulsive med student. This Ethan radiated confidence and quiet authority. Nurses deferred to him without hesitation. Even when the situation had turned critical, he'd never lost control. Eventually the room emptied completely, leaving only Ethan at the foot of her bed, updating her chart. "Thank you," Megan said into the silence. "For everything." He looked up, his expression softening. "I was just doing my job. We both know it was more than that." She shifted Lily carefully, wincing. "Out of all the hospitals in Boston, all the doctors on call." She shook her head. "It's hard to call this coincidence." He allowed himself a small smile. "Statistically, it is. I'm only at Boston Memorial for 6 months as a visiting specialist while they implement my patient management system. Today was my first shift covering maternity." He closed the chart with a snap. "But you're right. Of all the days." She watched him, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the one on the magazine cover. "I saw that Time article," she said. "The billionaire doctor. You actually did it, Ethan. Everything we used to talk about, clinics in developing countries changing healthcare." "Not everything," he murmured, meeting her eyes. The unspoken truth stretched between them. They were supposed to have done it together. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed on the side table. Ethan handed it to her. Penny's name flashed on the screen. "My sister," Megan said, answering. Relief washed over her at the sound of Penny's voice. "Yes, she's here. Her name's Lily. Lily Grace." She listened, then her shoulders slumped. "All flights? Cancelled." She closed her eyes. No, I get it. It's the storm. Just get here when you can. We'll be okay." When she hung up, she blinked back tears. "Penny can't get a flight until tomorrow at the earliest. The storm shut down half the eastern seaboard." "You were planning to stay with her after discharge," Ethan guessed. Megan nodded. "Just until I got on my feet. My apartment is being treated for mold. Actually, that's why I came back to Boston." The orchestra I played with in New York folded, then the building issues, it felt like a sign. She stroked Lily's cheek. "I never expected Jack to leave when I told him I was pregnant. We'd been talking about marriage. I thought." She trailed off, suddenly aware how much she'd said. To disappear like that. Ethan's jaw tightened. "What happened with your music?" "Last you heard, I was second chair with the New York Philharmonic," she said, bitterness surprising her. "For almost 3 years," she went on when he nodded. "Then they cut the budget. Pregnant, not a soloist, not a big name. It didn't help me when they decided who to let go." She exhaled. "I've been teaching kids to play scales ever since. Covers the bills." "Barely." But with the baby coming. And this Jack? Ethan asked quietly. He's completely gone? She met his gaze, refusing to flinch. Completely. I haven't heard from him since the note. His parents said he moved to Seattle, changed his number. They were almost as shocked as I was. She looked down at Lily. I've made peace with it. Lily and I will be fine on our own. Something shifted in Ethan's expression, hardening into decision. You should rest, he said, standing. I'll check on you both in a few hours. After he left, Megan dozed in fits and starts, waking to every soft sound Lily made. Each time the door opened, she half expected Ethan. Each time it was only a nurse. By early evening, she'd convinced herself he'd handed her off to another doctor, wanting distance from whatever snarled knot they'd once been. Around 8, a soft knock sounded. Come in, she called, wrestling with the bland hospital chicken and her wiggling newborn. The door opened. Ethan stepped in, not in scrubs now, but in dark jeans and a charcoal cashmere sweater. He carried a takeout bag that filled the room with the scent of garlic and tomatoes. I thought you might want real food, he said, setting the bag on her tray. It's from Romano's. Still your favorite. For a second she couldn't speak. Romano's had been their place in med school, a cramped Italian restaurant where they'd celebrated exams, birthdays, and that one miraculous night she'd landed her spot with the Philharmonic. You didn't have to do that, she said at last, even as her stomach growled. I know. He unpacked containers, pasta, salad, still warm bread. Consider it Lily's first birthday dinner. As he moved around the small room, she realized he looked uncertain. The confident doctor from earlier had been replaced, however briefly, by the young man she remembered. Ethan, why are you really here? She asked quietly. He set down a fork and met her eyes head-on. Because you need somewhere to go after they discharge you. Somewhere safe and clean for Lily. He drew a breath as if bracing for impact. I have a guest house on my property in Brookline. It's fully furnished, separate from the main house. You and Lily can stay there until your apartment is livable, or you find another place. Megan's jaw dropped. You're joking. I'm not. His face was unguarded now, earnest in a way that punched at old memories. It's sitting empty. You need a place. It makes sense. Ethan, we haven't spoken in 4 years, she said, shaking her head. The last time you saw me, I was walking away. Now I show up in your hospital, in labor with another man's baby, and you want us to move into your guest house. Her voice cracked. Why would you do that? He glanced at Lily, then back at Megan. Pain flickered there, quickly smooth but not fully hidden. Because once you were the most important person in my life. Because I know what it feels like to be alone when you need someone. And because no baby should start life in a cheap motel, while her mother scrambles to find housing. Megan's eyes burned. I can't accept something like that. It's too much. Just think about it. He reached into his wallet and laid a sleek card on her tray. Ethan Reed, MD. Founder and CEO, Meditech Solutions. My personal cell's on the back. The offer stands no matter what happened between us. She looked down at the polished card, at the name beneath the titles. He had built everything he'd wanted. The foundation. The company. The magazine covers. The house in Brookline. And here she was, broke, newly single, with a preterm baby in a hospital bassinet. Your life seems perfect, she said softly. The clinics. The company. Time magazine. You don't need complications like me and Lily. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Appearances, he said, checking his platinum watch, are overrated. Success isn't exactly what I imagined. He straightened. I have a conference call with our Tokyo office at 6 a.m. I should get going. He reached the doorway, then turned. For what it's worth, Megan, I think you're brave. Starting over. Having Lily on your own. That takes more courage than anything I've done. After he left, Megan stared at the door for a long time, her mind racing. The Ethan she remembered had been intense, brilliant, sometimes reckless. This version was controlled, polished, wealthy beyond reason. And yet, something essential seemed unchanged. As she finally drifted into sleep, Lily breathing softly beside her, one thought circled in her mind. Of all the outcomes she'd imagined for her life, ending up in Ethan Reed's guest house had never been one of them. 2 days later, Megan stood at the nursery window, watching a nurse finish Lily's discharge exam. Every part of her body ached. Her emotions felt scraped raw. The idea of walking out of the hospital's safe bubble into, what exactly, made her stomach twist. She'd spent the morning on the phone with her landlord, who informed her that mold remediation would take at least 2 weeks, with every affordable hotel she could find, all jammed with travelers stranded by the storm, with Penny, whose flights kept getting canceled. Ready to head home? Dr. Reynolds asked, coming up beside her and signing off on Lily's chart. The older obstetrician had taken over Megan's care after the delivery, though Ethan had swung by briefly during rounds the previous day. Not exactly, Megan admitted. My sister's still stuck in Chicago. My apartment's not habitable. I'm trying to find a hotel that won't wipe out my savings in a week. Dr. Reynolds frowned. That's not ideal for a newborn. Do you have any local friends who could put you up temporarily? The question landed like a stone. She'd lost touch with most Boston friends after moving to New York. Since returning, she'd been too focused on surviving the pregnancy to rebuild her social life. I'm working on it, she said vaguely. As Dr. Reynolds moved on, Megan's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Offer still stands. No strings. Ethan. She stared at the screen. Pride screamed at her to refuse. She'd gotten this far on her own. She could keep going. But another hotel voicemail told her they were full, and she glanced at Lily's tiny face in the nursery. Some choices weren't about pride. After an hour of mental arguing and one more dead-end call, she texted back. Just until my apartment is ready. We can pay rent. His reply came almost instantly. No rent. Address is 47 Oakwood Lane, Brookline. I'll have everything ready by 2 p.m. Car service will pick you up at discharge. By early afternoon, Megan sat in the back of a sleek black town car. Lily's car seat buckled securely beside her, as they glided toward one of Boston's wealthiest enclaves. The driver, a courteous older man named Frank, had introduced himself as Dr. Reed's regular driver. Doctor said to let you know he's in meetings until tonight, Frank said as they turned onto a wide, tree-lined street of sprawling properties. Guest house is stocked. Mrs. Sullivan, the housekeeper, will check in on you. Megan nodded, mostly to show she'd heard him. With every passing house, each larger and more manicured than the last, her nerves tightened. Frank entered a code at a stone pillar. The wrought iron gate swung open, revealing Ethan's property. A sweeping glass and stone modern mansion perched among immaculate lawns and sculpted hedges. Farther back, she glimpsed a blue rectangle of pool and the curve of a tennis court. She'd known in an abstract way that Ethan was rich. The reality made her throat go dry. The driveway veered around the main house toward a smaller building. Smaller here still meaning spacious and elegant. That's the guest house, Frank said, pulling up. Home sweet home for now, Miss Harper. This is not what I imagined, Megan murmured as he helped her unbuckle Lily's seat. Dear. Reed only bought it last year, Frank said, carrying one of her bags. He's hardly here. Always on a plane, it seems. The guest house took her breath away. A 2-bedroom cottage in name only, it had soaring ceilings, wide plank hardwood floors, and huge windows overlooking a private garden. The style was warm but modern, comfortable rather than ostentatious. In the master bedroom, a pristine white bassinet waited beside the bed, a changing table next to it stocked with diapers, wipes, tiny onesies still bearing tags. When did he? Megan ran a hand over the bassinet's soft bedding. Doctor made a few calls yesterday, Frank said with a smile. Mrs. Sullivan handled the rest. He helped her bring in the few belongings she had. Then he gave her his number and a polite nod. Anything you need, just call. Welcome, Miss Harper. When he left, silence wrapped around her, broken only by Lily's soft breaths. Megan walked through the cottage in a daze. The refrigerator held neatly labeled meals and fresh groceries. The bathroom shelves were lined with high-end toiletries. In the sunlit living room, a glossy black grand piano dominated one wall. Her fingers actually itched. She just finished feeding Lily when a knock sounded. Assuming it was Mrs. Sullivan, she called, "Come in." Ethan stepped inside, still in a navy suit and tie, shoulders drooping with what looked like honest fatigue. His expression lifted when he saw her, and then Lily. "I wanted to make sure you have everything you need," he said. Everything and then some, Megan replied, gesturing around. This is incredibly generous, Ethan. Too generous. He shrugged, loosening his tie. The house was empty. I'd rather it be used. His gaze went to Lily, now drowsy in Megan's arms. How's she doing? Perfect, Megan said, unable to keep the pride out of her voice. Do you want to hold her? Something in his face softened. I would actually. She carefully passed Lily over. Watching Ethan cradle her daughter, this man who had once imagined babies with her, now holding the child she'd had with someone else, did things to her chest she didn't have words for. His large hands were gentle, supporting Lily's head with practiced ease. She has your chin, he observed softly. And your hair. The nurses said the same, Megan answered, studying them together. Ethan, I have to ask again. Why are you really doing this? And please don't say it's just because the place was empty. He eased Lily back into her mother's arms before answering. Sit, he suggested. They moved to the couch. For once, Ethan seemed to be searching for words. When I walked into that delivery room and saw you, he said finally. It was like being slammed backwards in time. Not just to us but to the person I was then. The kid who wanted to change the world, who cared more about patience than profit. He raked a hand through his hair, and the painfully familiar gesture tugged at her heart. Somewhere along the line things shifted. The foundation, the company, they're doing good, but I'm removed from it. I spend more time in boardrooms than hospitals. Tanzania, for example, I fly in twice a year, visit clinics we built, sit through meetings, pose for photos, sign checks. Then I get on my jet and go home. But you've helped so many women, Megan said. Those clinics save lives. I read about your work there. I know, he said. And I'm proud of that. But delivering Lily. He shook his head. That was the first time in years I'd really felt why I became a doctor. That direct connection. It woke something up I'd been ignoring. She studied him, seeing the faraway look she'd once glimpsed when he talked about global health over cold pizza at 2 a.m. You're not happy, she realized aloud. A wry smile crossed his face. I have a 10,000 square foot house I'm never in, more money than I can reasonably spend, and a schedule so tight my assistant schedules my meals. On paper it's perfect. In reality, he spread his hands. Is there anyone? She asked before she could stop herself. In your life, I mean. There was. He leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. Caroline. Pediatric surgeon. We were engaged almost a year. She ended things 6 months ago. Said I was married to my work. That I'd never show up the way a family needed. He met Megan's eyes. The irony's not lost on me. You left because your career had to come first. Caroline left because mine did. I'm sorry, she said quietly. And she was. It was probably right, he said, though his tone was not entirely convinced. Seeing you again, though. Meeting Lily. It's made me reassess some choices. He hesitated. Do you regret the path you chose? The question hit home. For years ago, leaving Boston had seemed unquestionably right. The Philharmonic. The stage. Her own name on the program. She believed she couldn't have both Ethan and that dream. Some days, she admitted. For a while it was everything I imagined. The music, the recognition, the rush. But I never anticipated how lonely it would feel when the concert ended, and I went home to an empty apartment. She glanced down at Lily. It turns out success isn't very comforting at 3 in the morning. Their eyes met, full of things neither of them seemed ready to voice. Lily's thin wail shattered the moment. I should feed her, Megan said, standing. Ethan rose too. I'll let you rest. I'll be gone most of tomorrow, board meetings in New York. Before I forget, though, he pulled out his phone. After you told me about your job in the Philharmonic, I called a few people. There's an opening for a piano instructor at Berkeley next semester. And the Boston Symphony's holding section pianist auditions next month. I put your name forward for both. Megan stared at him. You did what? Just opened a door, he said quickly. Whether you walk through it is up to you. But you're far too talented to spend the rest of your life teaching kids who never practice for release properly. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the display and grimaced. Tokyo. Again. He moved toward the door. Make yourself at home here, Megan. I mean that. The next morning, Megan woke to a text. Had to leave for New York earlier than planned. Back late tonight. Mrs. S will bring breakfast. Piano is tuned if you're interested. She lay there for a moment, Lily sleeping in the bassinet beside her, staring at the ceiling. Since the Philharmonic had let her go, she'd hardly touched a piano. The pain of it had been too sharp. Yet as she fed Lily in the gentle light filtering through the curtains, her fingers tingled with remembered patterns. After breakfast, with Lily napping, Megan drifted into the living room almost without deciding to. She sat at the bench, resting her hands lightly on the keys, not pressing down. Then she played. At first, the notes came tentatively, snatches of Chopin, a fragment of Debussy. Then muscle memory took over. Her hands moved faster, surer, slipping into pieces she performed hundreds of times, and into improvisations that poured straight from somewhere deep inside her. Time disappeared. She didn't notice Mrs. Sullivan enter quietly with lunch and leave just as quietly, watching her with a soft smile. She was in the middle of a particularly difficult passage when a familiar voice said from the doorway, "You still play beautifully." Her hands froze. She turned. Ethan stood there in his suit, tie loosened, jacket over one arm. He looked tired, but his expression as he watched her made her heart stumble. "I thought you weren't back until tonight," she said, flustered. "I rescheduled some things." He walked in, glancing toward the bedroom. Lily. Sleeping. Finally. Megan rose from the bench, suddenly self-conscious. "Thank you for this." She nodded at the piano. "I didn't realize how much I missed it." "Music was never just a job for you," he said. "It's part of who you are." He hesitated. "I called David Chun at Berkeley again this morning. He'd like to meet you next week about the teaching position." Before she could respond, her phone rang. Penny's ringtone. Megan answered quickly. "Penny? Did you make it?" "I'm finally in Boston," Penny said. "Rental car and all." "Where are you?" "I can come get you right now." Megan looked at Ethan, standing in the sunlit guest house he'd offered her without blink or hesitation. For reasons she didn't want to examine yet, she said, I found a temporary place. I'm wiped though. Can we maybe meet tomorrow instead?" After hanging up, she turned to find Ethan watching her. "You didn't tell her you're staying here," he said quietly. "It's complicated," Megan admitted. Ethan stepped closer. The faint scent of his cologne, exactly the same as in med school, hit her with almost painful clarity. "From my perspective, it's simple," he said. "You needed help. I was in a position to help. That's all. Nothing between us has ever been simple, Ethan." Something in his eyes changed, sharpening into resolve. "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we've both spent 4 years making it more complicated than it has to be." Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her. The first brush of his mouth was tentative, almost questioning, giving her room to pull away. Instead, her lips answered his, and the space between them vanished. His arms slid around her waist, drawing her closer. The kiss deepened, and suddenly the years apart burned away, leaving only the fierce, familiar connection neither of them had really forgotten. It was the same and not the same. The passion was still there, but tempered now by everything they'd been through separately. Older, heavier, real. When they finally broke apart, Megan stepped back, breathless, her mind whirling. "Ethan, Lily's cry cut clean through whatever she'd been about to say. "I should get her," Megan said, already moving. "I'll give you some space," Ethan said, raking a hand through his hair. "Dinner's at 8 in the main house if you want to join me." He paused at the door. "No pressure. And for the record," his gaze held hers, "I don't regret that. Not for a second." After he left, Megan scooped Lily up from the bassinet, her lips still tingling. "What am I doing, little one?" she whispered into her daughter's soft hair. "This is the last complication we need." She meant it. On paper, everything about this was reckless. She'd just given birth. She had no home of her own, no job, no partner. She was already balancing on a knife's edge. And yet, when 8 o'clock rolled around and Lily was fed, changed, and sleeping, Megan still found herself walking the stone path toward the main house. Ethan opened the door himself, dressed now in jeans and a pale blue button-down. He looked younger like this, more like the Ethan from her memories. "You came," he said, his smile lighting his eyes. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I," she admitted. He led her through a stunning modern interior to a kitchen straight out of a design magazine. Unlike the rest of the house, which had the slightly impersonal feel of a staged space, the kitchen lived. A well-used espresso machine, cookbooks with sticky notes, pots of herbs on the sill. A baby monitor sat on the counter, its small screen glowing faintly. "You cook now?" she asked, genuinely surprised. In med school he'd lived on pizza and instant noodles. One of the few hobbies that competes successfully with my inbox. He poured her a glass of sparkling water and nodded at the monitor. "I set up the receiver for the guest house. We'll hear Lily if she wakes." The simple thoughtfulness of it tightened something in her chest. Dinner was a creamy mushroom risotto, cooked with a level of skill that impressed her almost as much as his surgical precision had earlier. They didn't talk about the kiss. Instead, they traded stories of the years apart. Ethan told her about the early days of his startup, how a basic scheduling program he'd coded during residency had snowballed into Meditech solutions, now used in hospitals around the world. Megan talked about touring with the Philharmonic, the adrenaline of Carnegie Hall, the endless rehearsals, the constant competition. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked quietly as they lingered at the table. "When the orchestra let you go? Or when Jack left?" Megan traced the rim of her water glass. "Pride," she said finally. "I'd made such a point of choosing my career over us. Showing up years later with a failed job, a failed engagement, and a baby? Hi, sorry I broke your heart. I've completely wrecked my life. Can you help?" "Yes," he said simply. "That's exactly what friends do for each other." "Were we still friends, Ethan? After how I ended things?" He was silent for a moment. "I was angry," he admitted. "For a long time. But I never stopped caring whether you were okay. Or wondering if you were happy. If it had been worth it." Honesty deserved honesty. "For a while it was," she said. "The music, the shows, the prestige. It was everything I'd dreamed of. But the politics, the insecurity, the feeling that I was always one misstep away from losing it all." She shook her head. "By the time I met Jack, I was already questioning my choices. I think I fell more in love with the idea of stability than with him. A home. A family. Someone who wouldn't ask me to choose." "Did you love him?" Ethan's voice was very quiet. "I thought I did," she answered. Looking back, I don't know. He was safe. Until he wasn't. The baby monitor crackled, Lily's soft fussing growing louder. "I should go check on her," Megan said, rising. "Of course." He walked her to the door. "Megan, about this afternoon?" "It's okay," she cut in quickly. "We don't have to dissect it. We got swept up in nostalgia. In the moment." He studied her, his expression serious. "Is that really what you think happened?" Before she could respond, Lily's cries intensified through the monitor. "I really do need to go," Megan said, slipping past him. "This conversation isn't over," he called softly as she stepped into the night air. The next morning her phone buzzed her awake. "At your landlord's office, arguing about mold. Where are you staying?" "I need to see my niece." Penny reality rushed in. This place was a bubble, a beautiful temporary bubble. Outside it, life was still messy and uncertain. She had decisions to make that had nothing to do with Ethan or how his kiss had made her feel. She texted Penny the address, then spent the morning rocking Lily, watching the driveway. When a compact rental car finally pulled up near noon, Megan stepped out onto the porch, Lily bundled against her. Penny climbed out, took one look at the property, and let out a muffled expletive. "Holy smokes," she corrected herself, eyeing Lily. "When you said a temporary place, I pictured a friend's spare room. Not this." She turned in a slow circle. "Meg, whose house is this? What exactly aren't you telling me?" "It's complicated," Megan said, leading her sister inside the guest house. "I'm getting that," Penny said, her gaze sweeping over the tasteful furnishings, the grand piano. "And you look like you haven't slept in a month. Is Lily that bad at night?" "Not really." Megan drew a breath. "Do you remember Ethan Reed from med school?" Penny's head snapped around. "The Ethan? The one you dumped when you ran off to New York? What about him?" This is his guest house, Megan said in a rush. He was the doctor who delivered Lily. Penny sat down hard on the sofa. I'm sorry, I must have misheard. Your ex-boyfriend delivered your baby, and now you're living on his estate. She threw up her hands. Meg, that's not complicated. That's insane. Before Megan could respond, the front door opened. Ethan stepped in holding a small gift bag. Sorry, I should have knocked, he said when he saw Penny. I just wanted to drop this off for Lily. He set the bag on the side table, then came forward with his hand outstretched. Ethan Reed. You must be Penny. Megan's told me a lot about you. Penny shook his hand, eyes sharp. Wish I could say the same, but apparently my sister's been holding out on me. She aimed a look at Megan that promised questions. Silence stretched, broken only when Lily let out a hungry squawk. I should feed her, Megan said, seizing the excuse. Penny, come with me? Once the bedroom door was closed and Lily latched on, Penny crossed her arms. All right. Start from the beginning. Megan did labor the moment Ethan walked into the delivery room. His offer of the guest house, the kiss, last night's dinner. With each piece, Penny's eyebrows climbed higher. So let me get this straight, she said when Megan finished. The guy you dumped 4 years ago is now a billionaire doctor who delivered your baby, installed you in his gorgeous guest house, kissed you, and is using his connections to resurrect your music career. She shook her head. Meg, this is the plot of a paperback romance. It's not like that, Megan protested weakly. He's just kind. Men like that, Penny said flatly, don't do anything just because. They're used to getting what they want. What does he want from you? Nothing. The word came out sharper than Megan intended. He's not like that, Pen. He never has been. Penny's expression softened a fraction. I know you want to believe that. And maybe he is still that guy. But people change. Money changes them. Fame changes them. You have to be careful, for your sake and Lily's. The conversation left Megan on edge. Later, with Lily napping and the guest house feeling somehow smaller, she wandered into the garden, hoping fresh air might clear her head. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear him until he said, Your sister doesn't trust me. She turned. Ethan stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, expression guarded. Penny's protective, Megan said. She's been there through all of it, Jack leaving, losing the job, the apartment mess. She has reason to be wary. She's right about one thing, Ethan said quietly. You don't owe me anything. If you want to leave tomorrow, I'll have Frank drive you wherever you want. His gaze met hers. My offer really is without strings, Megan. Her chest tightened. Then tell me why, she said. The truth this time. Not the polished. It was empty anyway answer. He looked out over the manicured lawn, the gleam of the pool, the sleek line of the main house. For a long moment he said nothing. When I saw you on that bed in labor, terrified and alone, he began finally. It felt like the universe was grabbing me by the collar and saying, wake up. Not necessarily, here's your second chance with this woman, he added quickly, but here's your second chance at what matters. I've spent 4 years building empires. Award dinners. Magazine covers. Plane waiting whenever I want it. And I have never been lonelier in my life. He turned back to her fully. I don't expect anything from you, but I'm not going to pretend I don't still have feelings. Because I do. I probably always will. That kiss. His mouth twitched. That wasn't a momentary lapse. It was the most honest thing I've done in a long time. Before she could answer, her phone rang. A Boston number she didn't recognize. Hello. Ms. Harper? David Chun from Berklee College of Music. Dr. Reed mentioned you might be interested in our piano instructor opening. I'd love to set up an interview. They talked timing and logistics. When she hung up, her heart was pounding for a new reason. They want to see me next week, she said to Ethan. Ethan, I appreciate what you've done more than I can say. But I can't build my future on your charity. I have to stand on my own, for Lily as much as for me. To her surprise, he smiled. Good. That's exactly what I want too. I introduced you. That's it. Whether they hire you is up to your audition, your resume, your interview. I have zero say in their final decision, and I wouldn't want it. And if they do hire me, she said slowly, And if I can afford my own place, then you'll move out of the guest house, he said steadily. With my blessing. And I hope my friendship. Something unguarded flashed in his eyes. But I'd be lying if I said that's all I want. I hope you'll consider the possibility of us. Not because you need a rescue or I need to feel like a hero. Because some connections are too rare to walk away from twice. She held his gaze, the words sinking in. The man she'd once loved, who had literally caught her daughter as she came into the world, who had given her shelter and opened doors, the man she'd left for a dream that hadn't turned out the way she'd imagined, was standing in front of her, asking for another chance. Her defenses, painstakingly built over years of disappointment, wavered. I have an interview next Tuesday, she said quietly. And Penny's helping me look at apartments tomorrow. A flicker of disappointment crossed his face, but he nodded. I understand. But, she reached out, her fingers brushing his hand before curling around it. Maybe we could have dinner again tomorrow. Just to talk. About possibilities. The smile that broke across his face was bright and unguarded, like sunlight after weeks of rain. I'd like that very much. As if on cue, Lily's thin cry crackled through the baby monitor clipped to his belt. Without a word he said, let's go see what she needs. Walking back to the guest house, his hand warm in hers, Megan felt something stirring in her she hadn't allowed herself in a long time. Hope. Not just for the job. Not just for an apartment. But for a life that didn't force her to choose between music and love. For a future where Lily might have two parents in her world. One who had arrived in the most impossible way a man could enter a child's life. 3 months later, Megan stood in the wings of Berklee College of Music's main performance hall, listening to the low hum of the audience settling in. On stage, the piano waited under the lights. In the front row, Ethan sat with Lily cradled in his arms. Lily's dark curls had thickened, her bright eyes lighting up whenever she spotted her mother. Beside them, Penny waved up at Megan, pride clear even from a distance. Over the past weeks, Penny had thawed toward Ethan, watching him show up again and again, for Megan's rehearsals, for Lily's first smile, for midnight colic walks through the guest house. 5 minutes, Professor Harper, the stage manager called, the title still strange and thrilling in Megan's ears. She adjusted the sleeves of her concert dress and took a slow breath. This faculty recital was her first performance since leaving the Philharmonic. More than that, it was the first time she'd play publicly for Ethan since their reunion. Unless she counted the quiet evenings when Lily slept nearby while Megan and Ethan traded music on his living room piano, weaving their way back into each other's lives. She hadn't moved into the main house. Not yet. She'd insisted on keeping the guest house for now, a tangible reminder that she could stand on her own 2 feet. But the lines between their spaces blurred more with each passing day. Ethan had restructured his work, stepping back from some global travel, carving out time to return to patient care twice a week at Boston Memorial. He still ran Meditech in the foundation, but he was there for school meetings and pediatric appointments, for bedtime stories and bleary 3 a.m. bottles. Every day, Megan found herself falling a little more in love with the man he'd become. Still brilliant, still driven, but steadier now, more patient. The man who had delivered her daughter, and in ways she hadn't expected, had delivered her back to herself. The stage manager gave her the cue. Megan stepped into the light. The audience blurred into a dark wash. But the front row came into sharp focus. Ethan's proud, steady gaze. Lily's wide eyes, little fists waving. Penny's encouraging smile. For years ago, Megan had chosen music over love, convinced she could not have both. Now, standing at the piano with everything she loved gathered in the first row, she understood something different. Sometimes the most beautiful compositions came from melodies you never planned to weave together. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play, not just for the hall, but for the small, fragile family taking shape before her. For the future that had found her at her lowest point, in a delivery room where her past and present had collided and opened a door to something entirely new.